Tonight we're going to show you the proper procedure for putting a vise on a machine, plus indicate it so it's parallel. And the most important thing is keeping it clean. How are you going to clean this table? How are you going to clean the vise? Those are probably the two most important things you can do. You're going to either use a large honing stone or you can use a flat file. Both work. I prefer the stone because it doesn't remove as much metal off the table. And you need a lubricant too. So we're going to use WD-40 plus the stone. Okay, first thing you want to do, wipe off your table with a rag. You don't want any metal chips on it at all when you got the stone on. Okay, once you get that done, the second thing, wipe it off with your hand. This will take off any smaller particles, plus you'll be able to feel any imperfections in the table that will actually lift your vise up. I mean, you can feel the little nicks just from like everyday use of putting tools on this table, any dents. So once you base this, since the vise sits in the middle of this table, that's usually where most people will clean. But you really should clean the whole table, because if you keep removing stuff from the middle, the table will actually develop a dip. So you want to do the whole table all the time. You take your WD-40 and you just spray liberal amount on. You don't have to go crazy with it. Now, the table is not that bad. There's two sides of this. There's a rough side and there's a fine side. I'm going to just use the fine side because it isn't real bad. So all you do is actually go in a circular motion. And you'll actually feel when you do this, you can feel where it's dragging over a high spot. I mean, it's kind of hard to imagine that you actually get high spots in this table. But I can actually see the ones from dents or dropping tools down on the table. You can actually see them when you do this. You can go in longer strokes, straight across. And it's kind of like evening everything out, but once you don't feel any more of like, your stone will stick over a high spot. You'll actually feel it's like stop a little bit. But once you don't feel that anymore, you're pretty well finished. So you can remove your stone, go back, now wipe your table off. You wipe it with a rag. Now wipe it with your hand. And you'll actually feel where your high spots. Now you can see some high spots. There was one here. And there's a dent right next to it, because every time you drop something, you put a dent in, it actually dents but swells the metal up around the dent. And that's what you're actually removing. Okay, so that finishes that. It's pretty nice, it's pretty smooth. That was the easy part of this. The hardest part comes next. So we're going to switch and go over to the vise now. All right? Okay. The vise, I flipped this vise upside down. Now, there's a bunch of nothing in these vises. They collect chips. So you want to wipe the vise down, because if you don't get most of the chips off, when you turn it back over, they could fall back onto the table and end up embedded in your table. The vise is a little harder than the table, so you might not get any dents in the vise, but you still want to do the exact same thing you did with the table. Same stone, same everything. We're going to stone the vise the same way we did the table. It's a little more difficult because of the spaces here, but like I said, the bottom of the vise is a lot harder than the table. So you might not feel like you're doing much, but in reality you are. You're actually making a nice smooth finish for the vise to slide onto the table. And I'm saying slide, I'm not saying place. So we'll explain that more when we're done with this. So you just go in circular motions, go around the outside, and when you feel you've done enough, you put your stone away, and now you wipe this off with the rag. Check for any chips, check for any imperfections, try to get around the bolts. If you're lucky enough to have an air line, you can blow most of these chips out. And then just rub it with your hand, and you'll feel how nice and smooth it is. Are you ready for this? Okay, now the hard part is picking the vise up. It weighs a lot, so if you can't pick it up, get someone to help you. The easiest way to get it on that table is make sure the table is low enough so you don't have to actually pick it up that much. So if you're a shorter person, you're going to want to lower the table down more. Okay, so now we just pick it up. You're going to carry it over here. And now I'm going to put it on like this. Make sure there's no chips. And then I'm going to tilt it and I'm sliding it on now. Now what you do now, you move this back and forth. The vise and the table are ground so smooth with the stone you use that when you do this, you actually can feel it want to stick. It actually wants to stick to the table. If it feels like that, you did a good job on your honing here. Now there, right here, by sliding it on, there was a chip. So that chip actually slid. It didn't go under the vise. So right there is how you start to set the vise up. Try to like center as best you can with equal amounts on the table. It all depends on what you're doing. I mean, you can set it one way or the other, but for most intents and purposes, you should put it somewhere in the center of the table. So right there is where I'm going to start to line the vise up. So I will drop the table a little bit. Now I'm going to get my T-nuts and my clamps. Now this is what I use. You can just use the T-nut. But I like using the clamps on top. It gives it an even amount of pressure. It gives a little more surface. So you lock it and stick one on one side, snug it up. There's another one on the other side. I'm going to put it in, slide the whole assembly down, just tighten it by hand, kind of line my vise up by eye. To do that, you can tap it either way you want. Now, the easiest way to indicate this, some people do it different ways, but I found this to be the easiest way. Once you get these bolts in, tighten one side, just one side. What we're going to use is an indicator with an extension on it. The indicator, the needle moves. This is going to give us how straight our table is going to be. So I'm going to have to drop the table to get the indicator in position. Be very careful with the indicator, just the slightest bump, it will break. The needle is very sensitive. So you slide the whole assembly back up in, install it just like you did your cutter. You swing your indicator down. Now the end that we tighten, we're going to bring the table over to that end. Okay, having a power feed makes it easier to indicate. your vise rather than cranking the table. So some of you might not have the feed, so you're going to have to crank the table. And now we bring the indicator down with the needle below the top of the jaw. We're going to move the table in until the needle touches the jaw, and you'll see the needle on the indicator move. Every line is 1,000, so I don't want to move it a lot because I'm just trying to find the beginning of this. So what I do, I'll move it 5 thousandths and I'll set this back onto 0. Now I'll touch my power feed and I'm going to run the table this way so the indicator runs across the back of that jaw. So now you see the needle moving. That means that this is out of sync. The vise is not straight by like 1 full turn of the indicator. I am now going to bump that needle 1 whole turn around. Back to my 0. Okay, there's my 0. Now I'm going to snug this side back up a little bit. I'm going to run my table back the other way. Now you see the needle's dropping a little bit. Okay, I'm 4 thousandths out of square, out of parallel. I'm going to move this needle, I'm going to move the table back to my 0. Now I'll come back down the other end. Now I'm going to tap it again. Back to 0. Run the indicator back down the other end again. Okay, it is off still 2 thousandths. So I'm going to bring this back to 0. Run it back down here again. Okay, I'm off about a 1/2 thousandth, so I'm going to tap this, 0. Now that I'm close, I'm going to snug up this side. I'm going to move the whole table back down the other end. Okay, it is now parallel to my table. I'll take another pass down just to make sure, but I'm watching the needle bounce around. That's imperfections in the jaw. You're seeing it's bouncing. The jaw might not be smooth, but right now it's 0 here and it's 0 here. Now you can go back and really lock your vise in, and that's how you indicate the vise. Okay, so that ends that. Remove your indicator the same way you remove any other tool, but what you don't want to do is drop this. So pull it out towards you and take it out. I recommend that you should indicate your vise anytime you crash a part, the end mill grabs a part, because it could actually twist the vise a little bit and it won't be parallel anymore. Or if someone uses the machine before you, you should indicate the vise just in case it happened to them and they didn't re-indicate it and they don't know about re-indicating it. So it's always good practice to indicate your vise if you've been away from the machine for a while or if you had some kind of an accident, because the vise will actually move no matter how tight you tighten them bolts.